Hey everybody, Douglas Blair Roberts here, the Super Vader 400, and of course the brown skin human coming back at you with another movie series review intro. My previous movie series review intro, whenever I uploaded to YouTube, for some odd reason, the newest, the Crush 40 upload of Sonic What I'm Made Of, their uploaded version for some odd reason has a copyright on it, and whenever I see, and the copyright is actually not a problem according to YouTube, but if I ever want to set this account up for monetization, it will be a problem. So I'm going to do a remade version using two non-copyrighted songs. Even though this is an intro for movie reviews and rants, the What I'm Made Of will from now on this channel will only be the outro, and I'll use one of the old school non-copyrighted uploads of Sonic What I'm Made Of. The intros will feature the Sonic Heroes theme, which I haven't used in a long time, and of course the iconic We Can that I use a lot now. Everywhere on every other platform, the intros, I will use the old intro. So with that being said, let's get started right now. Hey everybody, it's time for the second part of my three-part Spider-Man part 1 Sam Raimi Spider-Man Trilogy review. This part will be the Sam Raimi Trilogy, and the next part will be the Tom Holland duology, setting up No Way Home. Like I've said in plenty of videos, I'm a huge fan of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man film franchise, and I appreciate what Sam Raimi and the X-Men films in the early 2000s did for superhero movies, and they were the best in their time, and they're still awesome. They're still awesome today in the brand new age of the MCU. When it comes to comic book adaptations, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy is the closest to the Spider-Man comic books. They changed a lot of things, but they're the closest. Both the Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland series went further away from what the comics was. In my opinion, one franchise, Tom Holland rebooted and reimagined Spider-Man the right way. Spider-Man the right way while still maintaining what was fun. Andrew Garfield's, in my opinion, deviated further from the source material and even more so ruined and disgraced Peter Parker and the Spider-Man mythos, which I'm going to talk about in some new Andrew Garfield webcam rants. I've already done a series of narration of the Andrew Garfield films. Next was going to be an off-camera webcam version like this one. The Amazing Spider-Man 2002. I remember seeing it when it first released. Believe it or not, back when it released, I initially wanted to see Attack of the Clones, the other big movie event of that year. But then I saw Spider-Man. And I've been a huge fan ever since. I was blown away. I got into the comic books around the time I saw this film. Shortly after I saw this movie. I knew Spider-Man from the various cartoons and animated series. And I was seeing the cartoons, especially the 90s one, come to life on the big screen. All of these iconic moments. The wrestling scene. The Uncle Ben death. Norman Osborn being fired from his job, forced out of his company, and swearing vengeance and attacking his former employers, except it was vastly different in the 2002 version. When I get to that scene, the 2002 movie version, seeing all of those iconic scenes, the Peter Parker Harry relationship, the Peter Parker Mary Jane relationship, seeing all these iconic scenes come to life. Peter Parker, Spider-Man swinging through the city. Then one thing that was different. See, I grew up with the PG cartoons, which for some odd reason, especially in the 90s version, edited out bullets. It also edited out a lot of punching. The characters mostly kicked, wrestled, and threw things at each other. In that cartoon. Here, they did all that, but it was faster paced, intense, bloody, like something out of quote unquote Mortal Kombat. In this film, that final fight between the Goblin and Peter Parker is still one of the coolest and most brutal fight scenes I've ever seen in a superhero movie. Never seen Spider-Man get that violent and bloody as the 2002 version was, man. And the 2002 version, in my opinion, while being the weakest, is, in my opinion, the most exciting of the series, especially when it came to action. The action sequences, followed by everything else in the film, are my all-time favorite scenes from this movie. And everyone played their parts very well. The actor who portrayed Uncle Ben, who this part right here is also a tribute to him, because he's the only actor who is dead now. The actor who portrayed Uncle Ben in this version is dead now, and he's been dead for a long time, since 2011. I didn't even know. The actress playing Aunt May, despite her age, she was great, and up until the MCU version was the best Aunt May. Now let's get to the characters we want to see. William Dafoe, my opinion, was not only a perfect Green Goblin, he was the best Green Goblin, and he is William Dafoe and James Franco's version of Norman and Harry Osborn and the Green Goblins, respectively, are my all-time favorite incarnations, story, portrayal, and even design-wise. That cheesy Halloween costume from the comics and cartoons that doesn't fly, in my opinion, in an MCU film. The what I like to call the muscle tan Power Ranger Guyver Batman classic Batman suit is way cool. Is way cooler for Norman Norman Osborn and Harry Osborn, Norman Osborn. That iconic voice, all of those memorable quotes. In which these are my favorite favorite versions. And even though they changed it, these are my favorite versions. Yeah, they changed it in the comic books. Norman Osborn was more ruthless even before he got his powers. Was more ruthless, and hated Harry Osborn, thinking he was weak. In this film, he's more sympathetic towards his son. He's more sympathetic and actually likes his son and has a Jekyll and Hyde personality, similar to the Lizard. The Lizard's storyline they passed over to Norman and Harry Osborn in this movie right here. What else about this movie? What else about this movie? And Tobey Maguire, the coolest and best Peter Parker and Spider-Man of all time. Tom Holland is better portrayal-wise because he nails Peter and Harry. Peter and Spider-Man. The comedy, humor, action. He knows when to be serious. But Tobey Maguire was different because he was the adult college and workforce Spider-Man. My favorite era of Spider-Man. High school stuff is great, but I like older, much more confident college and workforce Spider-Man. Especially because that's where I kind of am in real life, so I kind of prefer that stuff more. The storyline. Yeah, this film takes inspirations from the Ultimate Spider-Man comics, the original Amazing Spider-Man comics, the 1970s Spectacular Spider-Man comics, which features Peter Parker at the university, and what was that other Spider-Man, and the various cartoons. I was seeing all of that come to life on the screen, which is what an adaptation should be. It should encompass every era of Spider-Man. By the way, there is no footage playing in the background because this film has way too many copyright music, and yes, they have the very awesome Hans Zimmer score, and they had Nickelback's Hero. This film actually introduced me to the band that was Nickelback. This film introduced me to Nickelback. Plot is of course your average nerdy high school student Peter Parker, who is best friends with Harry Osborn, which was in the Ultimate version. Something I didn't know till recently, the college in the original version, Peter Parker and Harry met and were best friends in college. In the Ultimate version, they were best friends in high school. I never knew. I always thought it was high school. Never knew it was different like that. One where Harry's his best friend, Peter Parker is being picked on by Flash and other people. And has a crush on the girl next door, Mary Jane, portrayed by Kirsten Dunst. What else about this film? Oh yeah, Peter Parker. One day on a field trip, he gets bit by a radioactive spider. He gets radioactive spider and starts feeling different. And first off, he starts feeling quote unquote different. He sleeps the rest of the day. He takes off his glasses. He takes off his nerdy glasses because he doesn't need them anymore. And he notices his enhanced abilities and wants to impress Mary Jane, so he uses his newfound power and abilities to go to a wrestling match, and he makes his own costume, which is another thing I liked about this film. When it comes to spectacle and realism, I thought the movies, particularly this film and the Tom Holland films, were better were when it comes to spectacle and realism were better than their comic books. When it comes to the storyline and build up, the comic books were way better because they had issues. They had issues they had issues and for the cartoons episodes to develop the storyline and characters. Anyway, going back to what I was saying, one thing I've never liked about Spider-Man was since he didn't have mentors, he didn't have a Batman, a Superman, an older version of himself. He had to learn on his own. So which means he went from a normal student with little to no money to he went from normal street clothes to a very expensive tailor-made theater production based costume. This is the issue I've always had with Spider-Man. With every other version, it was either the mentor providing it for him, it was built somewhere like in space for the Thor armor on the Nibiru planet, like the Thor armor and weapons, or it was made in a laboratory, like Tony Stark. He made his and War Machine's armor in a laboratory or a cave, and Reed Richards made the spandex so the Fantastic Four could contain their powers, and the radioactive rays made Big Grimm's new costume, and the radioactive cosmic rays made Big Grimm's Thing costume and look, and ultra gamma radiation made Incredible Hulk's look. But you see how it is? It was either some laboratory or space experiment gone wrong, or the other characters tailoring and hand making them with materials in a laboratory somewhere and providing their comrades and friends with them, or some other costumes with some other supernatural means, like the Green Lantern and the rings. But you get what I meant. Whereas Peter Parker went from an ordinary everyday person like you and I to a tailor-made theater-based costume. I like how here he went from an ordinary everyday guy to the cool, I like to call the Halloween ninja costume he had in this film. Till finally when Uncle Ben died. Yes, after he, even though the bet was for him to last a certain amount of minutes, Peter Parker not only last, but he survived, and he picked the guy before the time limit was up. So he only got the guy cheated him, but only gave him half of the money. He was owed. Meanwhile, a robber comes in to rob the place. The thug robs the place, and Peter in retaliation earlier refuses to stop the guy. This is one difference between the comic books. I just read the comic books in preparation for this review series and another rant on the Amazing Garfield series, which I love ranting on. Peter Parker in that comic book, quote unquote, refused. Peter Parker just refused because he didn't see it as his problem. Here, he had a reason. But he also had a reason to, because the promoter just cheated him out of money. So the robber got away. But then Peter later finds Uncle Ben dead, and he learns it was that same robber who he quote unquote let go. Love that scene right there. And then the robber, Peter Parker webs him in the comic books and lets the police deal with him. Here, the robber, this is another difference. In the cartoon, in which he just webs the robber. Here, the robber falls and dies. The guy dies. One thing I like, being more realistic and being more darker. Being more quote unquote darker, and then he decides that with great power, with his Uncle Ben's dying word, with great power comes great responsibility, and decides, and then finally he transfers into the iconic costume we know. But that was the one thing I liked about the live action versions versus his comic book version. He went from a street clothes to a cheesy Halloween costume, to his iconic theater tailor-made costume from the comic books. Then Harry Osborn's storyline with him being forced out of his company was spot on. Then when he came back later as the Goblin and straight up murdered them, that's another thing. he straight up murdered them. In the comic books and cartoon, he just merely attacked each of them. He just merely attacked each of them. Peter Parker managed to save them. Here in this film, he brutally murdered everyone. Yeah, in the cartoon and comics, they didn't kill a lot of people. Well, in comics, they kill a lot of people, but in the cartoons, they didn't. Here in the movies, they killed just about everyone. The Goblin kills just about everyone. So that was one thing that was interesting. What else about this awesome film series right here? Oh yeah, Peter Parker, Garfield. I mean, not Peter Parker. So yeah, Spider-Man swings on the So yeah, Peter Parker. Like I said, the Goblin Fights. All of them. The wrestling scene, the scene with the robber, the hallway fight with Flash Thompson, where he evaded his blows and gave Flash Thompson that awesome right hand, and the fight with the thugs who were attacking MJ. The Goblin Fights 1 and the much superior part of 2, the bloody, violent one at the end, where the Goblin threw him into the building right there, and then threw the goblin grenade at him, and it blew up it straight up blew up his mask, and then the Goblin started pounding on him, just owning him, and then Peter Parker, when the Goblin threatens MJ, Peter gets his second win, and bam, starts beating the Goblin. Then the Goblin tries to gain mercy by pretending to be Norman, but this is all a ruse for the Goblin to kill Peter Parker, and Peter Parker flips out of the way, and Norman Osborn is impaled by the glider, is impaled by the quote unquote glider. Then you see Harry Osborn swearing vengeance on Peter Parker, who he doesn't know is Spider-Man yet. And Spider-Man can't, at the end, the heartbreaking scene, he can't be with Mary Jane because with great power comes great responsibility, and he can't be with Mary Jane because him being with her would endanger her. Like I said, powerful movie. And for those who keep trying to talk about how useless Mary Jane was, she's supposed to be useless. She should not be a match for any villain in Spider-Man. And yes, while she can't be a superhero like Peter Parker, not all of them can be superheroes like Peter Parker. They have their own life. You see her struggling at home, struggling at quote unquote at home, and then quote unquote, what does she do next? Oh yeah, she's an actor in plays. She's an actor in plays and stuff. So and is top of her class at school. So yeah, while she's not a superhero, she has her own life. So yeah, and she's realistic. She's quote unquote realistic. Yes, in the comic book, she's more supportive of Peter Parker, and it's not the slave driver and just the annoying, unlikable bitch that she is here, but it's more realistic. So yeah, awesome entry, awesome start to the very awesome Sam Raimi trilogy. And Sam Raimi did a good job. See, people talk about Sam Raimi doesn't know Spider-Man. Sam Raimi did Evil Dead. A dark, cynical horror comedy action film. And so since he did that, he is the perfect person for a Spider-Man movie, and it was shown here. So this was Spider-Man 1. Get ready for the next one, 2004, Spider-Man 2. Now it's time for my review of Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 2, in my opinion. Spider-Man 2 is widely considered the greatest superhero movie and comic book film of all time. While I do think it's one of the best superhero movies, I don't think it's the best superhero movie, and I also don't think it's the best Spider-Man movie. I think it's the second best Spider-Man movie. It's definitely bigger and badder than the first one, even though I find the first one to be much more exciting. This one is bigger and badder than the first one. This one gave you more what the first one gave you. It gave you more action, we go more in depth with Peter Parker wanting a normal life, but he can't have this normal life, wanting a normal life and wanting Mary Jane, but he can't have it because of the burdens of being Spider-Man. And you see the whole thing with him losing his powers, which I'm actually surprised. That was actually from a comic book. I remember that briefly being in the cartoons, but I had no idea that was actually from a comic book. It's from the comic book Spider-Man No More, penned by the late Stan Lee himself. And Doc Ock in this film, is much to my surprise, is actually based on a Doc Ock from one of the comic books. I don't remember which one it was, but one of the comic books. I don't feel like going to look it up right here. And of course, the one I knew he was based upon, the animated series Doc Ock. I like the animated series Doc Ock. The animated series Doc Ock was awesome. The animated series Doc Ock was awesome, and him being Peter, people criticize Doc Ock for being different. Yeah, they took inspirations from that other comic book version of Doc Ock and the animated series where Doc Ock was Peter Parker's teacher and mentor. And in that version, just like in this film, while the motivations were different, they were both trying to regain something that they lost. And here it was, keep forgetting what his motivation was in the Spider-Man 2 movie, but in the animated series, he wanted to regain his lost planet, lost world of Laviria, I think something like that. I mean, Octavia, like, I think it's Octavia. Laviria is Doctor Doom's place. Octavia, something like that. But that's what he was doing in Spider-Man 2. I mean, Spider-Man the animated series, and yeah, spot on with Harry Osborn taking control of his father's business, him eventually discovering that it was Peter Parker is Spider-Man, and setting up their rivalry, which is a big part of the next one, Spider-Man 3, and yeah, the only thing I didn't like was Mary Jane, the altar, leaving J. Jonah Jameson's son at the altar to be with Peter Parker. But this scene, I didn't like that. But this scene does make me appreciate Peter Parker more, because he knew Mary Jane was in a relationship with him, and he wanted Mary Jane to be happy, so he chose not to interfere with what was going on there. Anyway, yeah. So then favorite scenes are once again the action scenes, and followed by every other scene in the movie. Yeah, like I said, this one is not as exciting as the first one, but it's bigger, badder, and better. Love the humor. The old lady singing the Amazing Spider-Man. The old Asian lady, the middle-aged Asian lady singing the Amazing Spider-Man song, and Tobey Maguire's Peter looking at her like she's crazy. At the beginning with Peter Parker delivering pizza, and the guy tries to steal the pizza, and Peter Parker webs the pizza before he can eat it. The guy telling him, Peter Parker, your punk ass, your ass is fire. That part was also funny. As was Peter Parker losing his power and falling on the quote unquote car, and yeah, you don't need all that in a Spider-Man movie, but it's hilarious. And then yeah, and Alfred Molina, like I said, was an awesome. Alfred Molina was an awesome Doc Ock. Was a quote unquote awesome Doc Ock. And what else about this movie? Oh yeah, Peter Parker. Yeah, and I love Switchfoot's "Meant to Live." The band Switchfoot, their iconic song "Meant to Live" plays in this film, which, just like the first one, makes this film feel even more iconic. It makes this film, just like the first one, part of society, and part of our culture. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, Spider-Man 2, one of the greatest films. Spider-Man 2, one of the greatest films of all time. Don't really have that much to say about it because like I said, I think it's the second best. While I think it's bigger and badder than the first one, it's not as exciting as the first one or the third one, and it's my opinion just the second best of the Spider-Man series. It's not the best of all time. But yeah. This right here is my review of Spider-Man 3. Spider-Man 3. I consider Spider-Man 3 to be one of the best and most underrated Spider-Man movies of all time. It's instantly surpassed by all of the more recent superhero movies that have come out since Spider-Man 3 and recently. But this film right here was the biggest and coolest box office spectacle, comic book spectacle of 2007 with Peter Parker, with you have Peter Parker, Spider-Man, four comic book characters. It was a gigantic comic book come to life. Peter Parker, Spider-Man, Eddie Brock, Venom, Thomas Hayden Church's Sandman, and James Franco, New Goblin. Quote unquote, New Goblin. This adapted the Black Suit storyline from Secret Wars, and the Black Suit storyline from Secret Wars, and many more. This was my opinion, the biggest and best Spider-Man. We had all those four characters in one film, and finally, one of my all-time favorite villains, the Sandman, made his debut in this film, as did Venom. Yeah, the Venom that was in this movie wasn't the best Venom ever, but this was 2007, where them getting Venom into a film was a big thing, was a big deal. And believe it or not, when I watch it now, that's the only issue with this film. Venom, while my opinion, they made a good usage, a solid use of him, this film could have been better without him. He felt shoehorned into this plot right here. He could have just been Sandman and Harry, and that would have been it. Probably not have been as exciting, but film would have been shorter and even better than what it was. Had just been those two villains. But at least this film, in comparison to the Amazing Spider-Man 2, actually handled three villains very well. You had Harry Osborn, New Goblin, developed from the previous two movies. Then you had Venom and Sandman, who took pretty much this entire film to develop their characters and set up their motivations for fighting and wanting to kill Spider-Man. And while this Venom was vastly different from his comic book counterpart, it does line up with the animated series. Once again, seeing the animated series and the comic books come to life. The only other issue I had with this film is right when it was getting good, when Peter Parker webbed Eddie Brock from the symbiote and brought him over to the symbiote. Eddie, I was like, no. Eddie tried to recombine with it, and Peter threw the glider at him, and Eddie Brock died, killing the chances of a quote unquote Venom movie, and of course killing the chances for a quote unquote sequel to this film. Because I didn't care how it was done. I wanted it to be Venom. Then with Venom to be a bad guy. Then when he's defeated, Eddie Brock is captured in jail. Eddie Brock realizes what he's been doing has been wrong. Eddie Brock realizes what he's been doing is wrong. Then with the help of Venom, he eventually breaks out of jail. he eventually either gets out of jail or with help of Venom breaks out of jail, and encounters the other symbiote, Carnage, Cletus Cassidy, and team up with Spider-Man to stop him. But the Carnage, a more powerful and even greater threat than quote-unquote Venom. That's what I was waiting for to happen on screen. I think most people were waiting for that. But that didn't happen because Sam Raimi hated Venom. He hated Venom so much that he put the worst version of him and he just killed off the character so he wouldn't have to deal with it anymore. And I heard it was Sony once again pressuring them to put Venom in the movie. So favorite scenes of course are the action scenes, followed by everything else. The opening fight scene between Peter and Harry on the glider. Then the later street fight between them when Peter Parker gets the black suit. Then the gigantic then the CGI fights with the Sandman, both one and the much superior sewer version. Then the final battle between the Sandman. See, at the time, this premiered right around the time shortly after the Naruto and Gaara fight series of the Chunin Exam Finals aired on Cartoon Network. And at the time, when I saw Sandman turn into that giant monster, like, wow, he turned into the Shikaku, Gaara's demon transformation from Naruto. That's the first thing that came to mind when I saw that giant sand creature. And Peter Parker fighting that, then Harry Osborn seeing what his dad wrote, seeing what actually happened to his dad, and coming in to help Peter Parker even up the odds against then Venom killing Harry Osborn, which I'm surprised is actually accurate. Not Venom killing Harry Osborn, but Harry Osborn actually dying. That actually happens in the comic book. That actually happens in the quote-unquote comic book. So, was surprised how close it was, including Sandman becoming, for a brief time becoming a heroic character, which is what you kind of see at the end, him getting, unlike the other villains, him getting a happier ending where he's actually redeeming again instead of kind of being killed or him sacrificing himself. And speaking of the Sandman, for the most part, apart from him being more sympathetic in this film and his comparisons to Peter Parker's life and story, with him being the guy who accidentally killed Uncle Ben by pushing the other guy, I think, into him, causing the other guy to pull the trigger. Sandman is spot on with who he is, spot on, quote unquote, who he was. And speaking of Uncle Ben, Roberts, something like that. Robertson, that's his name. The guy who played Uncle Ben. Yeah, like I said, he retired from films in 2007. The Spider-Man trilogy was his final mainstream appearances in film. And much to my surprise, he died 4 years later in 2011. I had no idea. I've been wondering where this guy was. I was wondering, could we see him in the upcoming No Way Home film? But that didn't happen because that's not going to happen because he died in 2011. But yeah, that's sad that this guy died. He said he died of natural causes. I had no idea, but he was the best Uncle Ben. He was much better than Martin Sheen from The Amazing Spider-Man. He was the best Uncle Ben, and I loved his various scenes with Tobey Maguire, including the intense car fight argument scene. And sucks he's gone, because that's it. He was one of the best. Everyone played their role well in that trilogy. And loved Peter Parker with the black suit, love the cool, confident personality, and while you didn't need this, love the humorous dancing, the comb over, the emo comb over hair. All of it was awesome. All of it was quote unquote awesome and the cool. And I especially love the cool new Bully Maguire themes associated with the black suit Spider-Man, the black suit Peter Parker, the black suit Peter Parker, and the memorable lines that "Ooh, look at little Goblin Jr. Look at little Goblin Jr." and just the confident attitude, the confident, violent, aggressive attitude, him hitting Mary Jane. So yeah, that was Spider-Man. That was Spider-Man. And Tobey Maguire, let's talk about his Peter Parker. I love his development and growth throughout this franchise. First, he went from that average, socially awkward, nerdy kid who's bullied and disrespected by everyone except for his grandparents. Disrespected and ignored by everyone except for his grandparents. What else? What else about Tobey Maguire? Then when he gets his powers, he becomes more confident. But then he pays for it when he lets his confidence, his ego, and his emotions get in the way of what he's doing what's right. Then you see in Spider-Man 2, he wants to be Spider-Man, but he wants a daily life, but he can't have it. He wants a normal life, and he wants Mary Jane, but he can't have either, especially if he is Peter Parker or Spider-Man. Was the time we have been finally here. This movie, third movie, in the beginning, he's a celebrity. He's a celebrity, having beaten the Goblin and Doc Ock and saved the city numerous times. He's a celebrity and is liked by everyone except for J. Jonah Jameson and select people. What else about Spider-Man? Oh yeah. What else about Peter Parker, Spider-Man? What else about Peter Parker? Spider-Man. And what else? And then he gets the black suit. He becomes even more overconfident, violent, and somewhat more aggressive, and just downright harsh, including setting up Eddie Brock's storyline. Now, Eddie Brock deserved what happened to him, but Peter Parker should have known that he doesn't have a family, but he needs a job. He needs a job too. Yeah, what Eddie Brock did was wrong and he deserved it, but Peter Parker's supposed to be bigger and better than that. And Peter Parker basically just ruined and destroyed his life, which the guy deserved because he lied. But Peter Parker's supposed to be bigger than that, and he just destroyed because he had the suit. He just destroyed his camera and he just straight up humiliated him in front of everyone, and he got fired and setting up Eddie Brock's storyline. So it was awesome, man. It was awesome. It wasn't awkward. It was actually much surprising. The comics was much more complex in the quote-unquote comic books. It was much more complex in the comic book, much more complex and sympathetic in the comic books. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was vastly different as I would come to learn as I got older and did more research on the character. Yeah, Spider-Man 3, in my opinion, one of the greatest Spider-Mans. It's surpassed by the MCU duology, this was my review of the entire Sam Raimi trilogy. The Tom Holland series is coming next. You want to hear the rest of the music? Turn the video off right now.